So listen to this. There's a transfer story hiding in plain sight right now, and if people actually realized what just happened, it would be absolute chaos. While everyone's busy arguing about financial fair play, points deductions, and who spent too much this summer, one club quietly walked into Brazil and pulled off something that feels almost illegal. Without alarms, without headlines, without anyone stopping them. And let's be honest, if there's one club that treats transfer rules like optional side quests, it's Chelsea. Since the takeover, they've burned through nearly 2 billion euros, signed an entire squad worth of players, rewrote contract logic, bent timelines, dodged punishments, and somehow kept moving forward like nothing happened. And now, while Europe was distracted by major tournaments and louder transfers, they've done it again. This time hijacking a talent Brazil hasn't been this obsessed with since Neymar. I'm not exaggerating either. Scroll Brazilian football media for 5 minutes and you'll see it. Before he even touched senior football, fans were already saying, Endrick is special, but this kid is different. Like the video if you appreciate real football stories, and subscribe for more like this. And tell me in the comments, is the Premier League actually ready for him? And that was before records started falling. We're talking about someone who didn't just look good for his age, he looked unfair. Clips of him at 5, 6, 7 years old don't look real. Like someone dropped a future professional into children's football by accident. This wasn't a kid surviving against older players. This was a kid embarrassing them. Palmeiras knew what they had, Europe was watching closely, and somehow, quietly, almost suspiciously, Chelsea stepped in and walked away with what might end up being the biggest Brazilian steal of the decade. And the Premier League still has no idea what's coming. Some players are talented, some are trained, and then there are those rare cases where the only explanation feels uncomfortable to say out loud, like it was simply written that way. And the irony here is almost poetic because this kid quite literally grew up in church. He's the son of a priest, raised around discipline, routine, and belief. And on top of that, his own father became his first and most relentless coach. Not casual sessions either. Obsessive, daily work from the moment he could stand straight. By the time he was 3, his dad had already pulled strings through an old teammate to sneak him into an academy that technically didn't accept anyone under 5, and instead of struggling, he was humiliating kids years older than him. They had no choice but to move him up almost immediately. And it wasn't just the tricks or the flair, it was the way he listened. The way his eyes never left the coach, like a grown professional trapped in a child's body. Before he could properly read, he was already famous across the state. Parents started showing up to training just to watch him, skipping their own kids' sessions, and soon enough there were genuine complaints from opposing teams asking for him to be banned because matches had stopped being competitive. That's when the nickname started spreading, Messinho. And suddenly crowds wanted access. Scouts started sneaking in pretending to be parents, and the club eventually gave up and opened the sessions to the public. By the time he hit under 9s, a full-blown tug-of-war had begun between major Brazilian clubs, and when Cruzeiro finally won the race, they moved the entire family hours away, covered expenses, and even lined up sponsors, including Nike, who signed him younger than Neymar ever was. The problem was, behind the scenes, everything was rotten. Years later, it came out that Cruzeiro had tangled themselves in illegal ownership agreements involving an underage player who technically wasn't even allowed to sign anything, dragged the family into court, and when it exploded publicly, tried to save themselves by blaming the father, putting him at real risk of prison time. After a brutal legal battle, the moment the boy became eligible to sign properly, his dad drove him straight to São Paulo and handed him to Palmeiras. And even then, Cruzeiro had the nerve to go on TV and accuse the family of having no morals, a claim they later paid for in court. And somehow, through all that chaos, none of it slowed him down. At Palmeiras, he immediately won titles, scored in finals, and every time they tried to keep him at a level that made sense for his age, he tore it apart within weeks. At 14, he was scoring for under 17s, then doing the same in state competitions, then coming off the bench and producing goals at a rate that didn't even look fair. Solo runs, long-range chips, dribbles through entire defenses like cones. By the time the Academy fans started calling that group the billion-dollar generation, it wasn't hype anymore. It was damage control. And when it later came out that he'd been playing through a broken toe, taking injections just to finish the season, it only made one thing clear. This wasn't just talent anymore. This was obsession. Now, it's one thing when you hear stories like this about grown professionals, but when it's a kid doing it, that's when it stops sounding real. Because at just 15, they threw him straight into the Copenhagen, Brazil's biggest under-20 tournament, a stage where even elite prospects usually get swallowed whole. He barely saw minutes, sure, but even then he still managed to score early on, and honestly, if that ridiculous solo run he pulled off later had gone in, the internet might have melted on the spot. Palmeiras won the tournament anyway, and despite his limited role, the academy director came out calling him a super phenomenon, which tells you everything about how they viewed him internally. From there on, he was constantly bouncing between age groups, and every time they dropped him into chaos, he somehow made order out of it. In the under-17 Copa do Brasil semi-finals, he came off the bench away at Vasco, sliced through half their team to equalize, then started the home leg by bending in a free kick before sprinting half the pitch to set up another goal. In the final, of course he scored. Another trophy. Then they tested him again, this time late minutes in the under-20 Libertadores, and all he did was assist the winner. So they tried it again the next match, and he scored the equalizer. It was becoming ridiculous how often this kid was deciding games he technically didn't belong in. Eventually, they kept him with the under-20s for a longer stretch, and for the first time, reality hit a bit. Tougher defenders, less space, and yes, an actual final loss after years of winning everything in sight. But the response to that setback said more than all the highlights combined. He dropped back into the under-17 Brazilian Championship and went nuclear. 2 assists and 2 goals in the quarterfinals, including another dead ball strike and a thunderous finish, another goal in the semis. And then came the final against São Paulo, the biggest academy stage in the country, where he saved the best performance of his young career. 3 goals, a solo run to break the game open, a clean long-range strike for the second, and by the third, São Paulo were so desperate they hacked him down and basically gifted him the hat trick. On top of that, he added 3 goals and 3 assists in just 5 matches for Brazil's under-17 national team, which was the final straw. Palmeiras' first team coach, Abel Ferreira, completely lost patience, in a good way, and handed him his senior debut in the final league match of the season. So the kid who used to train alone in empty churches while his father prayed, dribbling around wooden benches, smashing the ball against stone walls, sprinting between pews like they were defenders, ended his year playing in the Brazilian Championship at just 16, fittingly against Cruzeiro, the club that once tried to destroy his family. And that's when everyone finally realized this wasn't a future story anymore. It had already arrived. From that moment on, the noise around him stopped being local and started going global. Palmeiras suddenly had PSG knocking on their door, floating the idea of an outrageous package deal for both him and Endrick. 80 million euros, cash, no drama. But this wasn't just another academy class anymore. This was the so-called billion-dollar generation, and Palmeiras knew exactly what they were holding. Still, to be safe, they ran one final test. They sent him back to the Copinha the following season, not because they doubted his talent, but because they needed proof he could dominate it, not just survive it. 4 games in, he had 6 goal contributions. Case closed, and when Palmeiras were shockingly knocked out by a team that had never even played in the tournament before, the safety nets came off. From that point forward, he was given permission to chase greatness without limits. After 4 months training full-time with the senior squad, he finally got his first start and immediately scored. Not just anywhere either, but in the Libertadores, becoming only the 3rd player under 17 to ever score in the competition. 2 weeks later, he followed it up with goals in back-to-back matches. By June, midway through the season, he wasn't adapting anymore. He was cruising. 2 outrageous assists against Vasco in a 2-0 win, then an absolute thunderbolt against Atlético Mineiro that made it look like he'd been playing senior football his whole life. Abel Ferreira was so convinced that he reportedly begged the board to keep him until at least 2027, openly saying he had never seen anything like this in his career. Carefully dancing around comparisons to Messi while still admitting the ball looked glued to his feet. But Palmeiras already knew the truth. There was no holding him. Europe was circling, and then Chelsea moved. They didn't rush. They didn't leap. They calculated. First, they understood that Real Madrid were effectively out of the race due to internal tensions between their chief scout and the players' camp. PSG were shifting strategy and could be priced out. Bayern and Liverpool rarely gamble this big on teenagers. City hadn't fully committed. That left Barcelona, the dream destination he'd openly flirted with for years. But Chelsea spotted the one advantage Barca could never match: immediate cash and patience. They could pay up front and let him stay in Brazil for another year. With Barcelona struggling just to register players, that was game over. What shocked everyone wasn't the move itself, it was the numbers. Every outlet reported something different. Some claimed the fee was as low as £27 million, which immediately raised eyebrows considering Chelsea's creative accounting history. Then his agent dropped the bomb: €61.5 million. The biggest deal in Brazilian football history, bigger than Neymar. And when you remember this is the same agent who orchestrated Neymar's move to Barcelona, that statement carries weight. The trick? Underreporting. A €45 million fixed fee plus €16.5 million in laughably easy add-ons. No goal targets, no trophies. Just 70 appearances across an 8-year contract. Appearances, that's it. And then, as if scripted, the very next day after the announcement, he scored a half volley and celebrated by mimicking Cole Palmer. A quiet message to his future teammate. July came and went with 2 more goals and 2 assists, including that rocket against Grêmio and that ridiculous solo run versus Bahia. But it was the performance against Cuiabá that flipped the switch nationally. 2 goals, 2 assists, a 5-0 demolition. At 16, he stepped up and buried a penalty like it was nothing, spending the rest of the match dribbling defenders into exhaustion. The very next game, he cut inside and scored again. That was enough. Brazil called him up. Second youngest player this century to receive the honor. And somehow, even that wasn't the peak. He returned to club duty, scored again, picked up a minor injury that sidelined him for 2 weeks, then came back immediately with a goal and an assist, pushing him to the top of the league's contribution charts despite playing just 59% of the available minutes. But the number that truly shook the country, 20 goal contributions before turning 18. A record Neymar never touched, the only player to ever do it. At that point, it was no longer about hype, potential, or comparisons. History had already been rewritten, quietly, efficiently, and right in front of everyone. Just when it looked like the story was about to end perfectly, football did what it always does and reminded everyone that it never follows a script. With 3 games left, he had Palmeiras sitting on top of the table, the title within touching distance. Then came the collapse. A loss to second-place Botafogo sent them slipping to second, and suddenly the pressure was real. He refused to disappear, though. In the next match, deep into stoppage time, he bent in a free kick to keep the dream alive, dragging them forward almost by force. But on the final day, it all fell apart. One last defeat ended the title chase. Yet even in failure, his season stood above everyone else's. He finished as the league's top assist provider, just shy of the top scorer, and delivered a campaign so complete, so overwhelming, that the voters did something they had never done before. They handed the Golden Ball for Player of the Year to an under-18. Not Neymar, not Kaká, not Ronaldinho, not even the phenomenon. One kid walked away with everything: best player, best newcomer, best forward, and top assist provider. 4 awards, 1 season, 1 name. And still, people tried to downplay it. Rumors started spreading that he'd eased off, that he was already thinking about England, especially after a missed penalty in the Paulista final. Conveniently, they ignored the fact that Palmeiras only reached that final because of his man-of-the-match performance in the quarterfinals, where he scored 2 outrageous goals under pressure. They ignored the solo goal against Botafogo SP that looked like it had been lifted straight out of Neymar's Puskas reel. Reality hit back fast. In his final 12 league matches, he stacked up 10 more goal contributions, shutting down the noise 1 game at a time. Then came the Club World Cup. On the world stage, lining up against the biggest teams on the planet, sharing the pitch with Messi, he didn't look overawed. He looked at home. Again and again, he proved that reputation meant nothing once the ball was rolling. And just before his journey in Brazil was set to end, with elimination looming and fate cruelly lining up Chelsea as the opponent waiting on the other side, he left one final message, one last thunderbolt. A goal struck with the kind of confidence that doesn't ask for permission. Only attention, almost like a warning. Because when he finally walks into the Premier League, this won't be a kid arriving to learn. This will be a problem arriving early, and whether England is ready or not, it won't get a choice.